So you want to own a dog daycare, a big open room, a few dozen dogs, a webcam in the corner so parents can check in from their desks, charge $40 a head, stack up the daily tickets, let the golden retrievers do the marketing for you. Simple business, adorable product. Nothing here looks complicated. Here's what nobody puts in that picture. A newlywed couple standing in a hotel lobby the morning after their wedding, staring at a text message about their dog. A courtroom in Texas, where a lawyer explains calmly that under state law, the dog was worth about $70. 21 dogs dead at a single facility in Washington state before anyone with a badge showed up to ask why. And a woman who started this entire business with $83,000 from her husband's life insurance policy and ended up running for governor. None of that is in the franchise brochure. All of it belongs to the same industry. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why a business this simple is actually built on three things that have almost nothing to do with dogs. Let's start with what everyone assumes. Most people think a dog daycare is about as complicated as a lemonade stand. Rent a warehouse, put up some fencing, hire a few college kids who like animals, charge $35 to $55 a day per dog. That story survives for about 10 seconds. Then the numbers start arguing with it. A no-frills daycare, home-based or squeezed into a strip mall unit, can open for as little as $20,000. A proper commercial build-out, the kind with rubber flooring, air filtration, and separate play yards sorted by dog size, runs $45,000 to $150,000. Go upscale, with hospital-grade ventilation and full webcam infrastructure, and you're past $400,000. Put a national franchise name on the door, and the number jumps again. Dogtopia, the largest dog daycare brand in North America, discloses a total investment of roughly $540,000 to just over $1.4 million. Same industry, same basic pitch to the customer, a price tag that swings from $20,000 to well past $1 million. That gap is the first clue that something else is going on here. It gets stranger. Some financial models built for investors project nearly $900,000 in minimum cash reserves before a single dog walks through the door, just to survive build-out, deposits, and payroll until the place breaks even. Other tech-forward concepts with proprietary booking software and dedicated transport vans push that number past $2.5 million. You can open a dog daycare for the price of a used car, or for the price of a small apartment building. Same pitch, wildly different machine underneath. Here's the second clue, and it's the more revealing one: payroll. In a typical daycare, staff wages eat more than half of every dollar that comes through the door. Not because owners are careless, because the safety math doesn't bend. You need roughly one staff member for every 12 to 15 dogs, and that ratio doesn't care whether the room is packed or half empty. Rent, insurance, utilities, all fixed, whether 5 dogs show up or 50. So that $35 day rate you assumed was profit. Most of it evaporates before it ever becomes your paycheck. Which leaves a real question. If the ticket price barely survives its own costs, why is this one of the fastest growing categories in the entire pet industry? Because the daily ticket was never the actual business. It's the bait. American households now spend over $150 billion a year on their pets, up from around $100 billion just a decade ago. The average dog owner spends roughly $2,400 a year on their animal, double what it was in the mid-2000s. Pet services alone, daycare, boarding, grooming, training, have more than doubled in that time, to roughly $14 billion, the fastest growing slice of that spending. The U.S. dog daycare market sits around $1.7 billion today. Zoom out to the global boarding and daycare category, and you're near $20 billion, still climbing. That's real money, growing fast, but almost none of it is collected the way you'd expect. The real dog daycare business runs on 3 engines: a subscription engine, a franchise royalty engine, and a liability engine. Only one of those 3 has anything to do with dogs playing in a room. Let's start with the subscription, because this is where it gets clever. Walk into any serious daycare today, and the front desk won't quote you a day rate first. They'll quote you a package. 10 visits for $350. Unlimited monthly access for $400 to $800, sometimes more. In New York, one boutique daycare charges members $1,350 a month for daily play, grooming, and what it markets as a canine therapist. In London, a members-only operator charges up to £840 a month for the same basic promise: come whenever you want. Here's what that does to the math. A member paying $400 a month who only shows up twice a week is paying for roughly 9 visits and using 8. Close enough, fine. But the member who signs up with the best intentions in March and by June is showing up 4 times a month instead of 20? Still billed the full rate, every month, on autopay. The daycare isn't really selling dog sitting anymore. It's selling exactly what a gym sells: a recurring charge, justified by a guilty conscience and a calendar that never quite clears up. The industry even measures itself the way a hotel measures room nights, in what operators call dog days, a unit that counts occupied slots, not dogs. Slots. That's engine 1, recurring revenue that gets paid whether the dog shows up or not. But that's only the first engine, and it's not even the biggest one. Now the franchise royalty, and this is where the real money actually concentrates. Take Dogtopia, 280-plus locations across North America. The median franchise location pulls in roughly $916,000 to $948,000 a year in revenue. Sounds healthy, but the owner, the person who signed the lease, hired the staff, and put up the capital, typically walks away with somewhere between $127,000 and $163,000 a year. A net margin in the mid-teens. Payback on that $500,000 to $1 million investment, 7 to 9 years. Meanwhile, the franchisor takes 7% of every location's gross revenue as a royalty, plus another 2% for marketing, 9% off the top. Collected whether that location is thriving or barely surviving, and it doesn't stop there. On top of that, 9%, Dogtopia franchisees also owe a monthly technology fee of roughly $900 to $1,500 and a separate digital marketing fee. None of it optional. All of it owed whether the playroom is full or half empty. Here's the number that tells you how tight this leaves things. The SBA default rate across Dogtopia franchisees sits around 5%, lower than the franchise industry average, which tells you the model is survivable. It doesn't tell you it's easy. Across roughly 280 locations, doing north of $200 million in system-wide revenue, that 9% adds up to tens of millions of dollars a year flowing straight to corporate headquarters, with zero exposure to any one franchisee's bad lease, bad month, or slow winter. Put plainly, the asymmetry is almost unfair. The franchisee carries the real estate, the payroll, the insurance, and a decade-long wait to get rich. The franchisor carries a fixed percentage and none of the risk. One side owns a dog daycare. The other side owns a royalty stream shaped like one. Camp Bow Wow, the other major national brand in this space, runs the same architecture at a slightly smaller scale. Mature locations commonly reporting several $100,000 in annual profit on investments in the $700,000 to $900,000 range. Different logo, same machine. And when the really big money wants exposure to this industry, it doesn't buy a single daycare at all. In February 2024, Blackstone, one of the largest investment firms on the planet, paid $2.3 billion in cash for Rover, the platform connecting pet owners to sitters, walkers, and boarding hosts. Not one physical facility changed hands in that deal. Blackstone bought the software layer sitting on top of the entire industry, the same way sovereign wealth funds buy airports instead of airlines. Own the terminal, not the plane. Own the platform, not the kennel. So that's 2 engines down, a subscription that gets paid regardless, a royalty that gets paid regardless. There's a third engine, and this is the one that should actually make you uncomfortable. Picture the playroom again. Dozens of dogs, off-leash in close quarters, supervised by staff earning close to minimum wage, on a ratio of roughly 1 adult for every 12 to 15 animals. None of that is inherently reckless. Millions of visits happen every year without incident. But it is inherently unpredictable in a way no spreadsheet can fully price. And when something does go wrong, this industry has built a remarkably effective system for making sure it doesn't cost very much. Every dog daycare and boarding facility in the country asks you to sign a waiver before your dog's first day. Buried in that waiver, almost always, a liability release and often a mandatory arbitration clause. Courts routinely uphold both, And underneath all of it sits a legal fact most pet owners never think about, until it's too late. In nearly every U.S. state, a dog is legally classified as personal property, not a family member. Property, like a couch or a bicycle. Remember that couple from the opening? In August 2024, Jordan Hawks and Brian Roby dropped their dog Kaylee off at an Austin area boarding and daycare facility before leaving for their honeymoon. On the first morning of that honeymoon, they got a text. Kaylee had been rushed to an emergency vet. Records later showed she'd overheated in the facility's transport van. She died. Another 3-year-old dog died the same way, the same day. When the couple asked what legal options they had, the answer was blunt. Under Texas law at the time, a wrongful death claim for a pet is valued at its property worth. As one of them put it afterward, almost word for word, the dog was worth about $70. $70 for a member of the family. And Kaylee's story isn't an outlier. It's a pattern. In 2025, authorities arrested the owners of a boarding facility in Washington state after 21 dogs died on the property, allegedly denied adequate water and ventilation. 21. At one facility. Even Dogtopia, the biggest and most polished name in the industry, hasn't escaped this. A 2023 lawsuit in Harris County, Texas, alleges a French bulldog died of heat stroke at one of its locations. A separate 2024 incident at a Temecula, California location involved a dog's tail amputated after a bite during a holiday boarding stay. So here's the first weakness in this business, stated plainly. The physical model is fragile, margins are thin, labor is mandatory, and a single bad afternoon, a broken air conditioner, an understaffed playroom, one dog with the wrong temperament mixed into the wrong group, can end in a death. There is no federal law directly regulating dog daycare facilities in this country. Oversight is a patchwork of state and municipal rules, and in many states, it's remarkably light. Here's the second weakness, and this is the one that actually protects the business. The legal system caps the cost of that fragility at almost nothing. A waiver blocks most claims before they start. An arbitration clause routes the rest away from a jury. And even when a family wins, the payout is bounded by what a dog is worth as property, not what it was worth as a member of the family. It's the same asymmetry that makes a bank teller hand over the cash without a fight, because the money is insured and her life isn't, just wearing a different coat here. The facility absorbs almost no downside from the worst thing that can happen inside it, because the law was never built to price that outcome accurately in the first place. Put the three engines together, and here's the real architecture of this industry. A subscription model that gets paid whether the dog shows up, a franchise royalty that gets paid whether the location profits, and a liability shield that caps the cost of catastrophic failure at the price of a used couch. Now, the part where a real person actually opens the doors because somebody always has to. In 1994, a woman named Heidi Gannell was sketching out a business plan with her husband, Bion, for a better kind of dog daycare. 6 months later, he died in a small plane crash. She shelved the idea, drifted through a string of jobs that didn't fit. Pharmaceutical sales, financial planning, a baby bedding catalog. Nothing stuck. Nothing felt like hers. In 2000, with $83,000 left over from Bion's life insurance settlement, a single mother in her mid-30s opened the first Camp Bow Wow in a spare warehouse in Denver. By 2003, she was franchising it. Within a decade, it was the largest pet care franchise in the world. More than 100 locations, a brand reportedly valued around $100 million. In 2014, she sold it to VCA, one of the largest veterinary companies in North America. Then she ran for governor of Colorado. She lost the 2022 general election to the incumbent. But sit with the shape of that story for just a second. Insurance money from a fatal plane crash turned into a national dog daycare chain, turned into a 9-figure exit, turned into a campaign for the governor's office of an entire state. Started with a leash and a spare room, ended on a ballot. That's the outer edge of what this industry can produce, when the subscription engine, the franchise engine, and a decade of relentless discipline all point the same direction. Most owners never get anywhere near that outcome. Most get the version we described earlier, a thin margin operator handing over 55% of revenue to staff, praying occupancy clears the 70% break-even line before the lease renews. So let's finish exactly the way we started, with the actual math. Scenario 1. An independent, single-location daycare. No franchise name on the door. Startup investment around $120,000 to $180,000. At maturity, say 40 to 60 dogs a day, blended pricing averaging $35 to $45. Annual revenue lands around $500,000 to $700,000. After payroll, rent, insurance, and supplies, a net margin in the 15 to 20% range leaves the owner with roughly $75,000 to $120,000 a year. Respectable, not retirement money, and entirely dependent on you personally showing up most days for years. Scenario 2. The franchise route, Dogtopia scale. Total investment, $540,000 to $1.4 million. Mature location revenue around $900,000. Net owner profit, somewhere between $130,000 and $160,000 a year after handing over roughly 9% of every dollar to the franchisor, regardless of how your year actually went. Payback, 7 to 9 years. In exchange, you get a known brand, a training system, and someone else who's already been sued and already updated the paperwork accordingly. Scenario 3. You don't stop at one location, 3 or 4 sites, shared management, shared purchasing, grooming, and retail layered onto every one of them, feeding the same back office. This is the version that actually produces the fortunes in this industry. Not one well-run playroom, but a repeatable system, stamped across a metro area, with the high-margin add-ons doing the real work once the daycare side has covered its own bills. It took Heidi Ganal about 14 years to go from one Denver location to a 9-figure exit. This is a slow business, one that occasionally rewards extraordinary patience. It is not a business that rewards showing up once and hoping the dogs are cute enough to carry the rest of it. So here's where that leaves you. Either way, you were never really selling daycare. You were selling a recurring subscription people feel too guilty to cancel, wrapped inside a franchise fee that gets paid before you do, sitting on top of a legal system that already decided in advance exactly how much your worst day is allowed to cost. The dogs are real. The play is real. The affection at pickup time, every single afternoon, is real. But somewhere in the paperwork you signed on day 1, in language you probably didn't read past the signature line, is a single sentence quietly answering the only question that actually matters in this business. If something goes wrong, what's the most this is going to cost? For the business, that number is almost always small. For the family standing in a hotel lobby, reading a text message about their dog, it never is.